Does anybody else have it pulled up?
Actually, I was gonna try to get the
You just need the
release up.
you just need the front end code.
Yeah. Okay, I can pull it up and share. Here. You can see?
Yeah.
Let's see. So in app.js, let's wait for the syntax highlighting to get up. So like in index.js, we got our little router guy. We're creating our own history object so that we can use that history elsewhere, right? And that guy is being created in the store history.js right here. Let me move the zoom out of the way. We just grab it from the history library, which is what React Router uses right underneath the hood. It's just if we create it and feed it to router, then we can use the same object elsewhere to do history.push. That's what that's about. So like if you see here, we're just feeding it into router. So we're like, hey, don't use your own history, use ours. And that goes into app.js. And in app.js, you got these three. This not found is gonna hit anytime these other two don't. This is a switch statement, so it's only one of these are gonna render at any given time. If we took this auth off, there's no way to differentiate between those public pages and the dashboard pages. So if this was slash, then we'd have to make this one dashboard. And this is the most commonly used one, so picked auth. That's the only reason. Only because of layout though. That was the whole point of separating in this way, is because we have one layout for these guys and we have another layout for everything in here. And that layout is the same across the board for everything in there. So that's the whole point of this. Otherwise we just use the one route and not worry about it. But then if we go to form layout, so React Router lets you like nest things, right? Nest the routes. It used to be that you'd have like an array appear and then of like possible routes and you do for loops or whatever, but they went with like a more declarative thing where you just put the routes inside the routes, but like you render a component first and then in that component you can render a route. Route you're on to get that info. There's mesh.path, mesh.url. Mesh.url like resolves the URL, gives you like the actual URL. Mesh.path will keep those parameters intact, like the :ID stuff. Did I freeze?
For a second, just on, yeah, we just got the tail end of the difference between URL and match.
Right now you're all frozen for me. Hold on. All right. Say something, somebody.
Test.
Hey. Yeah, mesh.url is the exact URL up to this point. Mesh.path will keep the parameters as parameters so that you can access them in this component, for instance. So like when you do match.params.id, it won't work if you use mesh.url, but it will if you use mesh.path. Does that make sense? The slash right here is only because like we don't use it for the dashboard just because that one's a slash already. It's weird, but this one's not. This one's auth, right? And it resolves that for you. It's weird that way. Like it's like a buggy thing. It's not like, I don't think it's expected behavior. But if you go to the dashboard layout, this won't work if you put a slash, just because it's already a slash. So I guess it's having trouble resolving that. And then that's it really. Do you want me to go over these guys too, like why they're not just route?
Sure.
There's a routes folder here. This is to handle like the redirecting. So the logic here is like it's still a switch statement, so only one of these are going to render at any given time. If none of these paths match by the time you get to the bottom, the redirect has this little ternary here that's like if the user is admin and that user is just being grabbed from the store up here. And if that user's admin property is true, this path, otherwise, and because this is the root for admins, this is the root for students. This coach route, student route stuff. So the basic one is just public route. This one's a wrapper. It's not doing anything special. I just figured if you did want to do something special, like Google Analytics or something, why not stick it in here? But other than that, it's just re-rendering. Like it's the exact same thing. Nothing weird is going on in here. Student route. This guy checks if, because initially we only had a coach route, but then we didn't want coaches to access requirements or anything because they wouldn't have requirements. So we put a similar set of logic here. Like if user is admin and they hit a student route, then redirect to this guy, which if you recall, if you do a slash in here, it just hits this ternary. This way we get to like tell this here, like if we want something to be a student route, do this. If we want it to be a coach route, label it like this. Otherwise, just make it a, like this could be route the way it is, or it could be public route. I think this is just an oversight. This one's supposed to be public route, like this one is. But that logic in here, okay, so this hook right here, this use logout, it's coming from this folder here. This code is being slow. Use logout is that's what a hook is. It just means like it has like its own little state going on with like this guy, for instance, and it usually has like a use effect thing going on. These can only go inside of React components. If you try to call this inside of like Axios, like an interceptor or something, they would throw. But this logic here is just, we end up using this logic elsewhere, like a lot. Anytime we want to do auth to check if local storage has the token, to check that the store, the user in the store is admin or whatever, or is logged in, we end up having to duplicate this logic. So I just pulled it out into a hook. That logic being check it first, right? So if the stuff being saved to local storage, remember it's like token and I don't know, it's like is admin. Yeah. Is it user ID or is admin? One of those. But like if that thing that gets returned from this function, which is local storage.get item for auth, I think, if dot token is equal to null, set this little guy up here. Set it to false. If user doesn't exist and user is being pulled from the store here, if for whatever reason that doesn't exist, do the same thing and set it to false. Each time we're returning, so like, except for here, this is a typo. Should be returning here too. But yeah, anytime you hit this, just set it to false and get out of there. If there's no user, set it to false and get out of there. Otherwise, set it to true. Then the way useEffect works is like you just put as many of them as you want, and you just tell it when to call itself. Like, when should I call myself? When any of these changes. Obviously, when we set this guy's going to change, which is going to go over here and call this guy. But we're going to say if this is false, dispatch the logout action, which is actually doing, because it's kind of tricky to empty the store. Like, one thing we weren't doing before was like we're logging people out, but the store, like in the Redux, like if you just see all their stuff still. So to clear that, there's a little like thing going on in here somewhere. But that's what this is doing. It's triggering that. We can go look at it in a second. But then it clears local storage, which, you know, it's just a wrapper for local storage in here somewhere. And then this stuff here is like, this guy here is asynchronous, right? And so if I just did a history.push right here, it kept throwing errors at me. And there's probably like a more elegant way of solving this, but this works too. Just delay by 100 milliseconds. And this has enough time to do its thing. So it doesn't cry. Because what the error is saying is that when you history.push, this component gets, wherever this useLogout is, it gets unmounted. But this still runs. And it cries. Reducer. So this dispatch logout. Let's go look at actions. It's not an asynchronous action, actually. It's just a, well, regular ass action. And that it's a logout. Users index. So before we were just returning the combined reducers. And this is something that we should, because you know how we have to do like state.requirement reducer state.user reducer. That's kind of, there's no point in doing that, and it just looks like dumb, but like it's being used so many places in the code. I don't really want to refactor it, but really we should be able to say state.user, state.resources, state.requirements without having to say requirement reducer.requirement, like, you know, like but this was what we were returning out of this function before, combined reducer, just straight up. And that was what the store was using. Instead, we now do this guy by default. And what this guy is doing is saying, hey, if the action is that logout action that we're sending, just clear the state and then return this guy. So if that action, if it's any other action, this doesn't run. And it's the same thing as if we return this guy directly. But when it is the logout action, we're going to clear it. And the way reducers work, when they have a undefined state, they just return nothing, right? And that clears the state. That's pretty much it. I think this was your code right here, Adam. The use greeting, same logic, but no, you can use it elsewhere. You know, like same state. It's just in wherever this is being used, when that first mounts, same logic. Return the greeting. Gradient one was kind of crazy because for the progress rings, there was this bug where, like, on mobile views, once we added the sidebar, the sidebar would go away on mobile views. And SVGs are weird when you're using linear gradients because they sort of just attach to the first linear gradient that shows up on the page in the DOM. And so when that sidebar left, the linear gradient was also leaving. So any progress rings that were on mobile views, they didn't have gradients. And so to try and fix that, there's this crazy thing that basically just appends a linear gradient element inside of every SVG that uses the progress ring.
Hey, is it okay if I stop the recording right now?
I don't know, dude. I don't know why you're recording, actually.
Because you're at full power right now because you got all that sleep. But for other people to review,